You know, there's some fights that will pop off the page. And I wake up every morning. This is what I do, right? I don't go to Fox News and CNN. I check all of the world news. I check MMA first. I go to the dirt sites. I'm at the elbows. I'm at the manias. I'm checking it out. And every now and then there is a fight that will pop off the page that I feel like the UFC made for me. I will love a fight so much. I will thank Sean. Hey man, thank you for making this fight. I'll reach right out to Sean Shelby. And he'll always write me back like, I'm glad you approve, or like a smiley face. But sometimes I feel like he made it for me. Chandler versus Gaethje is one of those fights. And I still maintain something's been going on with Justin Gaethje. I don't have the answer to it. I never will. Gaethje has just acted abnormal lately. I'll just remind you what I'm talking about. He fights Khabib. He doesn't fight again. He doesn't talk about fighting again. He doesn't put out training videos. Absolutely nothing happens with Justin Gaethje. Giving you guys a time frame. Khabib steps away from the sport. Now, for me, apparently Gaethje's now the #1 contender. Wouldn't that make sense? If Gaethje had a belt, and he did, the interim belt, but he loses to a guy, but that guy leaves. Just by default of definition, isn't Gaethje now the #1 contender? And that was actually touched on. That was actually touched on by Dana White, who said at a press conference, I might just have Gaethje sit and have him fight for the belt. So that's not as though I'm out of nowhere. That would make a level of sense. He had the belt. The guy that beat him for the belt is no longer in the sport or applicable for the belt. I guess it's Gaethje again. But Gaethje was very quiet. This was a major springboard that Dana had. So the next time we hear, and it doesn't just represent the next time, it represents the only time we hear from Justin Gaethje after his fight with Khabib. It's when he weighs in saying that Conor should not get a title fight. Gaethje didn't argue about something for himself. He was arguing to take something from somebody else. This is peculiar. I pass no judgment. I'm sharing with you. It was peculiar. It was not how Gaethje usually does things. In the meanwhile and leading up to this, we're even seeing videos of Justin Gaethje. Now, it's coming up on Kamaru Usman's feeds. Usman traded from Florida out to Colorado, workout partner of Gaethje. But at least we were seeing Justin. We knew what he was up to. Justin goes silent. Guys even quit calling him out. Guys who were calling him out, he didn't respond. It went on deaf ears. Nothing was happening. Gaethje pops up at the Arizona show. They stick him in the audience. He happens to be from Arizona. They use it as a cameo. The place goes crazy. We don't hear anything from Gaethje again. Now, Chandler steps forward and starts saying, give me Justin Gaethje. We're all, as viewer, I'll speak for myself, but all of us are, yeah, do that. Do that. Get Gaethje and Chandler. That's the one. Make that fight. But then it even looked like Chandler was moving on from there because there was nothing coming back from Gaethje. I could attempt to guess why. When you were as high, right, what do we know about life, guys? Anything that goes up must come down. When you were as high as Gaethje was, which was the interim champion, 246 the night he upsets Tony, but has his best performance of his life doing it, leaves there as champion, draws right into the sport's biggest star, the most popular Muslim athlete on the face of the planet. I mean, it's a big deal. Where Gaethje was a big deal. He's not going to be able to replace that. So what do you do? Do you do nothing? Do you retire? Maybe. It's an option. Or do you start over with the next best thing? What's the biggest fight I can get for the most attention? Whether that means a #1 contenders fight, whether that's a co-main event spot, whatever it might be, but what is the absolute best thing I can get? And is it enough for me? And that's just what an athlete has to ask themselves. Poirier had to do the same thing. Poirier was in the exact same spot as Gaethje, but one step higher, which is they built an arena. Now, even if you want to say they built that for Khabib, Khabib needed a partner, and his partner was Poirier. Now, Poirier had to jump right back on that horse, and he did. Now it's behind him. But Gaethje's now in that spot. What's he going to do? We now know what the answer is. I'm taking you back. This has been the timeline on Gaethje. What's he going to do? Where has he been? Why is he doing nothing? Why is he so quiet? Has he retired? I mean, all of these things were on the table for Justin Gaethje. Is he going to leave the weight class and go up to 170? All of these things were on the table. And now we've got the answer. It's going to be Chandler. I don't know where that sits on the card. That is an absolute feature fight. And if there's any better than that, fine. If there's two better than that, I'm going to have to see the damn card. That has got to be a co-main event. It's got to be. If you're telling me there's two fights better than that one, you've got my attention. I look at that, And I can't help but to wonder for other people that don't have a hand in steering their career. I mean, even as recently as what I just saw over the weekend, where I'm hearing that Jake Paul is going to rematch Tyron Woodley. The problem with that, there's only one problem. What happens if Woodley wins? Do we go and do this a third time? It was hard enough for these athletes to convince us why we were going to do it once. They're now going to have to tell us why we're going to do it a second time. But what happens if T Wood wins? Do we go to a third? That can be tomorrow's problem, but this is what a promoter is always asking themselves. I'm hearing that Rose and Weili are going to fight. Guys, I don't have a better suggestion for you. I do not have a better suggestion for who should be fighting Rose for that belt. There is nothing with their first fight that has any historical precedence to a rematch. Nothing. It was not competitive. Whatever competitive is, go look it up. The opposite is what that fight was. There was nothing about this that screams rematch, but Rose did not do a good job of finding herself another opponent. Other competitors within the weight class of 115 pounds did not do a good job of suggesting why they should get the shot and not Weili. Weili has not done a good job of getting herself the rematch. We are here by absolute default, and I am not putting them down. That is a fantastic division. It's just if I'm Rose, and I know full well the hardest opponent is Weili, who, by the way, I already beat. No one can say anything to me now or for future. Nothing on my legacy, nothing about the current time. If I know Weili is the biggest threat, I try to avoid Weili. Even if that means I have to build somebody else. So that was a miss. This is not a point in history that you go and study what Weili and or her management did. They did nothing. They did nothing correct. They did nothing interesting. You do have to study every other 115-pounder out there and wonder how they didn't see this as an opportunity and jump at it. How they didn't see this as ripe for the taking and start making their moves. They didn't do it. Of all of the blunders of MMA, and I generally see one every week, I have not seen one in a meaningful amount of time that has the consequences that a potential fight with Rose Namajunas, who is the reigning champion of the world and is rumored to be going to the Big Apple, by the way, and nobody tried to take that from Weili because it's the same spot. What happens if Weili wins? What do we do now? We go to a trilogy? It's the same gals who aren't going to be speaking up. It's the hardest fight for Rose, which is Weili. It's the hardest fight for Weili, which is Rose, but Rose has the gold. Weili's got to do the lifting. It's a miss. And there's no shame in following the rule of becoming champion and hanging on to that belt by keeping all those at bay off. But no one did it. Nobody called for an opponent. Nobody at 115 pounds spoke up and said they wanted it. Weili didn't ask for this and is being given it by default. This is a miss.